This is the million-dollar question out there that everyone wants to know. When will home prices come back down? Well, in order to answer that, we need to look at some various economic factors that will lead to the potential for home prices to come back down. Now, one thing we are seeing is we are seeing more and more homes out there with price cuts going. But one thing that people are complaining about, and especially that I read from you guys in the comments, is like, oh, big deal that they dropped the price 20 grand on a house that's $200,000 overpriced. Okay, fair point. But just keep in mind, guys, we did not see any price cuts just a few months ago. In fact, prices were just going up. Every single property on the market was basically getting, outbid and overbid, multiple offer situations. And a lot of that is starting to cool down now. Things are starting to return more to a normal market, even though things are still overpriced and competition can still be fierce in some markets. It's starting to normalize more and more across the country. But in order for prices to come down, we sort of need to have a perfect storm of economic factors come together, very similarly to how we saw all these factors come together that increase prices exponentially over the past few years. Because basically it was just the combination of the pandemic, people not wanting to move, the ultra low interest rates, and people taking early retirement. There was a million different things that came together that led us to the fact that home prices went up basically 20% year over year over the past couple of years. And in order for prices to come down, we need to have a similar series of events take place, but basically just moving in the opposite direction. So one of the first things we definitely need is supply. Now, I am of the mindset that there is not an actual housing market shortage. It's just that sellers are not listing their homes for sale. Because prior to the pandemic, if we look back to the real estate market in 2017, 2018, and 2019, we can see that this data from Redfin, the real estate markets were moving in a very healthy, normal cycle, and we were in a pretty balanced market, meaning that it really wasn't a buyer's market and it really wasn't a seller's market. In fact, the housing market was probably the healthiest it had been since the previous crash. And only since the pandemic happened, that sort of changed everything and made it where the supply of homes is artificially low. And I say artificially, it's because those homes haven't gone anywhere. They're still out there. They're still sitting in the world. But the thing is, people just aren't selling them for a multitude of reasons. You have people that wisened up to the idea of real estate investing, most notably the recent institutional investment that we've seen. So we have Wall Street getting in on the landlord game, as well as the regular mom and pop investors who were already out there and jumping into the market. Then we have millennials, people my age, jumping in to buy a home because they're at home buying age and they finally have some money, trying to take advantage of those ultra low interest rates. And then we also had the uptick in the remote work situation. We had buyers that were able to move from very expensive areas to relatively affordable areas. We can look at Sacramento as a perfect example of that, a place where the average house costs around $220,000, $230,000 just a few years ago, and now the average home there is like over 400 grand. Why? Because so many people that make big salaries from the Bay Area were able to move to an area like Sacramento and pay way more for a home than it's actually worth in order to win the bid, and therefore we have home prices rising in areas like that. But that's not sustainable, and that's artificial, okay? So the way that we can reverse this is we need to have more supply. Okay, that's the number one biggest thing in order to have prices come back down. And there's a couple ways I see that possibly happening. Well, eventually, people who own these properties are going to need to or want to sell for one reason or another. I'm not going to get into all the reasons now, but that's the first thing. The next thing is that people just end up needing to move, okay? Sometimes you need to downsize, sometimes you need to upsize, sometimes you have a job transfer, whatever. There's a lot of different reasons people sell their home, and not every homeowner wants to become a landlord and just rent the home out. I'm sure there are going to be a handful of people out there who are homeowners that opt to become landlords instead of sell their home, given the current situation, but many people will just list and sell and move on to the next place. But because of the situation that we're in, it's kind of restricting that, okay? You know, with these high interest rates and ultra high prices, people who would be normally moving and listing their home for sale aren't really doing that right now still, at least not at the pace that we saw prior to the pandemic. So until that dynamic returns to normal, we probably won't see home prices come down too much, at least just not yet. Yes, we are seeing those price cuts, but that's because those homes were overpriced to begin with. Let's take a look at the next factor, which is rising interest rates. Now the average 30-year mortgage interest rate is right around 5.5% for most people, sometimes over 6% depending on your credit score and your financial situation. So that is a huge increase over the 2.5% to 3% it was just a few months back. And that has pushed many buyers out of the market, which is actually good news for the overall housing market because it does mean that demand is cooling. So that is one thing that could potentially bring prices down. Say less and less people can afford a home because prices still keep creeping up a little bit in a lot of markets and the interest rates keep creeping up as well. There's just going to be a shrinking pool of buyers out there to buy those homes, and eventually what's going to happen is that's going to help bring more supply because the supply will continue to grow because less and less people can afford to buy those homes, and therefore once we have more inventory on the market, there's more homes out there listed for sale at these prices, they're going to have no choice but to lower the price on those homes in order to get them sold because of the higher interest rates and the lower buyer demand. Now, a lot of people will say, Michael, if prices start going down, then we're just going to have all the investors swoop in and just buy all the homes. And that's just not true because yes, they're going to swoop in and buy some homes, but the thing is, guys, they cannot buy everything. And also, they don't want to buy everything. The thing that really screws things up right now is the fact that investors are buying a lot of what we call starter homes out there. You know, houses that are in the $150,000 to $300,000 price range that many people would want to get into for their very first home. They're buying those homes, which is contributing to a shortage of those type of homes. But go look at your local market, and I'm sure you won't find a shortage of homes that are $500,000 and up unless the average price in your area is $1 million. But the thing is, once you get past a certain price point, there's an abundance of inventory out there for you guys. It's just that the homes that most people can afford are what we are in shortage of right now. Now, the next thing is we know that mortgage applications are down, and we know that home tours are down according to Redfin. So this is definitely a sign that things are starting to cool as well. But really, another big wild card factor that can have a big impact on the housing market is the looming recession. Now, we don't know how bad the recession will be. It could be a mild one, it could be a severe one, it could be a depression. We don't really know because we're not really in the thick of it yet. You know, it's kind of only just beginning. We've only had that first quarter of negative GDP growth, and we haven't really gotten down the line yet to really see how bad the recession might be in terms of how many companies might lay off their employees, how much further the stock market might fall, as well as how high these interest rates could continue to rise in order to fight inflation. So we don't know those things yet. And that's another huge factor that will contribute to how much supply of homes we have for sale and the price of those homes. So back to the beginning of all of this, when will home prices come down? We're going to need to see a confluence of all these things coming together, just like we saw the confluence of all these factors coming together that led to this massive increase in home prices. We're going to need to see that same confluence come together for prices to come down. Now, nobody can give you an exact date, and that includes me. I can't give you an exact date, but all we can really do is watch the local markets, and we are seeing a shift. That is for certain, guys. We are seeing a shift in the housing market right now that we did not see just a few months ago. So that's sign number one. Is this a guarantee that home prices are going to go back to pre-pandemic levels? No, it's not. Maybe they never will go back to pre-pandemic levels. I don't really know, okay? I do think that prices will come down in a lot of areas, especially areas that have gone up drastically over the past few years, but we just don't know by how much and exactly by when. So in order to answer the question of when, then the only real answer is when all these factors come together of a recession and increasing inventory and higher interest rates, that's when we will see home prices come back down. But here's the thing, even if we don't see prices come back down, the odds of seeing the type of appreciation that we've been seeing over the past couple of years is very low. We're probably not going to be seeing year over year price growth of 20% anymore. Things will probably be going back to the normal appreciation rates if there is no housing market crash. And if you're a seller out there and you've been thinking about selling, then you're going to want to check out this video right over here, giving you some reasons of why you may want to sell now instead of wait.